Welcome back. Time now for the news review, and we're joined by our guests in the studio. My own in-house guest, Sweetie Abochi, has taken her seat. Caught.
No.
Gotcha.
Ben
gotcha.
Doing that to me. Hi, I'm Sweetie Abochi. Ben and I co-host the show, and let me introduce our guest to you this morning. We have Dr. Fiamma, and she's a member of the NPP Comms team, and we have Kwame Osei Griffiths. He's a member of the NDC Communications team. Lady, gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Benjamin Akaku, now back to you.
Yes. Would you like to make me your guest now? But it's good to have you join the conversation. You know the tradition already, but to Mr. Griffiths, we always give about a minute, maximum a minute and a half to our news review guests to talk about something they find interesting, something they want to vent on. I'll start with her because she's done this before, and then maybe you can take it from there.
Today, I don't have a lot to vent on. Well, I think it's also a good day to send our condolences to the people of Obuasi. What happened there was disastrous, and I'm hoping that the new president is able to call for he's already called for an investigation, so we are eagerly awaiting detailed reports on that, because situations like that should not repeat themselves. I mean, lives are precious, and even if one is lost, I'm hearing the toll is even now confused, whether it's 8, 9 or above. So I think a lot more information needs to come out on that. Keeping it short and sweet today.
Yeah, short and sweet. But investigations are ongoing, so I guess we'll see what that will unearth. Yesterday, when we interacted with Felix Kwachiofosu, I was trying to push him to find out, look, how speedily can this be done? But he said at the same time, it's a major event. We want it done in time, but we also don't want to rush the security services. I mean,
for them, it's a tricky issue for them.
Very.
Since there is some responsibility.
Yeah.
And I feel like the events of that have brought in a lot of issues to light. How journalists should be more responsible, how all of us as politicians should be more responsible on the kind of things we say on the campaign trail. So, I mean, that's a terrible thing that happened, but we are all eagerly...
I know what you're referencing, but let's
see what happens. Yeah, I'm leaving it there.
Let's move on from there.
Short and sweet.
Let's allow the investigation.
Yeah,
Mr. Griffiths.
I think I'll continue on the same note, if that's okay. I think the presidency has requested 3 things to happen: an investigation, and also the fact that AngloGold, they want AngloGold to take care of the sick and then bury the dead, and also deployed some police and military to the area. And I because of that, it's very difficult to pass judgment since there's an investigation. However, having listened to...
But are we to pass judgment? It's more about the situation and how we got here and how we can get out of here.
Well, the issue is that if you listen to the miners, they claim that when they encountered the military, they knelt and raised their hands, and because that brings to the fore the rules of engagement. Are you really able to, to fire straight into a crowd when, The
military also says they were fired on.
Yes.
And then they give details of all the kinds of munitions these people were holding.
That's why I said it's difficult to pass judgment on this issue. Because they also have claimed that, if the miners, version of the story is true, then, then a lot of things would have to, maybe some retraining and what have you, because you pick from some of the soldiers you speak to that they are very ready to go on the offensive after what happened to the soldiers.
Okay.
See, these are
Major
underlining...
Mahama. Posthumously Major Mahama. That's
yes, Major Mahama.
The Obuasi.
Exactly. So,
I see.
And if the military also says they were fired, and the casualties have all come from the civilian side. That's also another thing we need to look at.
They have one.
But there was one
injured
soldier, like she was mentioning.
All the deaths, and one injured, yes. And then all the deaths have come from the other side. So those are things that I think the team would look at and then interrogate properly and then come up with.
Sweetie, just to top up on this briefly, like I've reiterated, one, this bit about the military getting involved in certain actions, when things come to a head, yes, you would have to fall on the military. Their orientation is very different. So when they engage, it's also not like the police. Like we've seen in some instances, like in Ejura, among others. And of course, there were committees set up. I remember Dr. Vladimir Intri-Danso on that committee. But the other angle too is, if it proves true, you don't engage the military and not expect. And when I say engage, if you shoot at the military, they will shoot back at you. I'm saying if it is true that these illegal miners, and I put it in the context, you see what is happening in South Africa, among others. The right things must be done. Civilian lives must not be compromised because of some gung-ho, military officer. That's the one end. But on the other end, you can't engage the military if they did and expect that, they'll not. Of course, they have to try to de-escalate. But if you are firing bullets at them, I just want civilians to realize that you can't do that.
Yes, and
you shouldn't.
And to add to that, these soldiers, I remember, I was in the military in the U.S. I was in the U.S. Navy. And I remember the first time we went on, to check, they check how many bullets you can fire. You usually do 30 and see how many will hit on target. When we started, it was 0-30. But before you left...
When you say 0-30,
it means
you are missing all of them.
Hit any targets. Usually for most people, it will be 1 or 2 or 3 or so. But after you are leaving your basic training, you are doing 30-30. Because these people, having a weapon alone is not enough to be able to use it properly. You need to develop that muscle memory that tells you that when you pull the trigger, it's hitting this target. Yeah. So, and the military have all those facilities to train. So it's very wrong for any civilian to think that you can have pump action guns and what have you and then engage the military in this way.
Right.
Let me also say that the military too have rules with which they engage. If there is an imminent threat, you are not supposed to deploy deadly force.
Yeah.
And even if you deploy deadly force, it has to be measured.
Yeah.
Obviously, if 8 or 10 people, I'm hearing 8, 9, 10, died on the side of the civilians and there wasn't any major casualty on the side of the military, then it was a bit disproportionate. Well, and I think that should also be,
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Points made. But let's get into the stories. I want to start by shining light on the new the new appointments that have come to bear. And we'll be putting that on the screens for you to see so far. But we know that as of now, these are the people who will be serving in the president's office. We have presidential advisor and special aide to the president. Looks like Mrs. Joyce Mokhtari maintained her position. And we have Stanley Jose Dogbe, popularly known as Stan Dogbe, and he's deputy chief of staff in charge of operations. We have Nana Oyebampoado. I'm excited for this one. And she's Deputy Chief of Staff Administration. And I think we all know who this woman is. She served as a gender minister. We have Seth Imano Tekpe, former finance minister. He's now serving as presidential advisor on the economy. And I think that's the former finance minister's role, right? When Akufo-Addo eventually moved in from finance minister, that's the position he got, advisor on the economy. And then we have Professor Francis Dodu, Presidential Advisor, National Anti-Corruption Program, Larry Gbavlo-Late, Special Envoy to the Alliance of Sahelian States. And then we have Nanaya Chepim Janswa, she was here yesterday, Presidential Staffer. Beatrice Anangfio is Presidential Staffer. Shamima Muslim, yeah, another strong woman from the NDC's camp, going as Deputy Presidential Spokesperson, which means she's assisting Felix Kwasi. And then number 10, we have Professor Kweku Dansobwafo, and he is Cabinet Secretary. So these are the new nominations or appointments that have come out so far from the presidency communications. What do you make of these appointments, ladies and gentlemen? Ekwe, I see you smiling. I'm just excited because Nana Oye is back in government. I think she was a strong oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kingsley. You know, she is a human rights lawyer with over 32 years experience. And she has so many awards. I can't wait to see what she does this time.
That peacock-like dress is amazing, though. Looks very good.
Right. Colors are vibrant.
Right. And that smile.
I think for me, I'm happy to see a lot of what I call my sparring partners on there, Shamima Muslim and Beatrice Annan. I mean, it's good to be appreciated. They put in a lot of work during the campaign, so Yeah, congratulations to them. Nanaya on the other side, I will have to meet her and ask her a few questions.
Nanaya, she was sitting right where you are sitting.
Because we used to meet
yesterday
on another show, and you know, she will take a lot of offense when you point out, it looks like you are really you are working on the reset team. She will literally fight with you. So I have to ask her now, what happened? I mean, but minus that, I mean, I'll just congratulate them all. It's early days yet, so let's see what they have to offer. But personally, I'm very happy for Beatrice and Shamima. Because we've been going at it throughout the whole campaign.
Yeah.
So.
I didn't expect that they would put someone in that position. What Ken Ofori-Atta had, you know, the advisor on the economy. The argument when he was moved from finance ministry to that bit was that it was not necessary. But here we are with somebody else there. And Setekpe has proven that, you know, he knows his business.
I think it's going to become very clear to a lot of Ghanaians. There are a lot of things that the NDC said during our term, and especially during the campaign, was just exactly that. What they were campaigning on, they will not be able to, because you're going to have 60 ministers and you have an army of people in your party and an army of people who worked. And let's not kid ourselves. When you join a political party and there's that machinery and effort to work to win political power, usually those are the people that form government. So, I mean...
Okay.
Well, let me just say this. I don't know whether to call it a correction, but it's an aside. The role Setekpe is playing is not necessarily the same role that Ken Ofori-Atta was
I was going to say
selected
title.
to.
The
title is even different.
As for an advisor, you would have advisors on the crucial sectors. In fact, cabinet areas, you would have advisors on all of them, including finance. It's just that this time, instead of being minister, he's an advisor, and then his former deputy is now going to be
but it's still
the minister.
What
we need to do, for the sake of accountability, though, what I want to see, because if you look at the top 6 names, for example, you know, Nanaya Ajantwa is technically not a member of the National Democratic Congress. She's CPP.
Technically, yes.
Right? But if you look at the top 6, these are all positions. And Larry Bevlolati, right from the start, in terms of security matters, he's my former lecturer. You know, his name had come up as part of the security team and all of that. No surprises in here, because if you look at the NDC over time, these are some, in fact, I feel it is good that I'm seeing these names here, because if we were not seeing them in ministerial positions and we're not seeing them here, then you would ask yourself, where are they going? Because then you would be at the risk of creating more jobs
for them
somewhere.
Yes, yes.
So I'm even happy I'm seeing them here. It means certain constituencies are being satisfied already. And then you have the others who have also played their role. My interest is Larry Bevlolati. He has quite some work to do, because, you know, this alliance of Sahelian states is essentially those that are breaking away from ECOWAS. And there's a lot of work to be done there. To even think of, I don't know how intractable the situation is or what the possibilities are in terms of reintegrating them in ECOWAS. That is, if they'll even be interested. But his work cut out for him.
Yes, because we are very strong voices in the ECOWAS. So
okay, let's hear Mr. Griffith.
Well, I've actually worked with most of them. Most of them. Joyce have had the opportunity to work closely with Standobe, and these are very wonderful people, very good at what they do, and most importantly, very dedicated to, you know, the work that they do. Nanoye, I'm very happy for, you know, for her finally getting back into government, and I wish them all well. I'm sure that they would do well for the, you know, this new administration. The title of the former finance minister, I think, I don't remember exactly what the title was. But it was
it's special advisor on finance and internet,
Yes, so it made us give him the name International Finance Minister, if you remember. And so I think it's a bit different from what the role of Setekpe. Setekpe, obviously, is one of the most experienced, you know, finance ministers that we have had in the past. And I believe that he getting close to the first gentleman would really be helpful to them.
And I guess to add to that point, when Ken Ofori-Atta, of course, once he was no longer minister, you had to, when he went, there were already advisors on finance. It wasn't as though he was now going to.
No, but you guys are right, actually. So it's he was senior presidential advisor to the president, and then he was also doing something about international matters in terms of finance. So you're
exactly.
right. It's
so
not
we call him the international finance minister because of that.
Anyway.
Should we get into the papers? The Ghanaian publisher. These are all stories from yesterday, actually, and it was the same picture that we saw. Akufo-Addo gives thanks to God. I did my best for Ghana. Ikuya, it's lovely to have you here. I want to take your bid on this in a bit. Now, military kills 7 illegal miners in Obuasi. We are learning that the death toll is risen. We are talking about 9 or so as we speak. EC appeals for security to complete Ablekuma North coalition. So let me just put this aside and get to the New Republic. Signal bosses spy ring around JM exposed. Mole planted on Reverend Wengam, paid by national security. Now, I do not know for sure if the fact here, but let's get into the details before we can discuss it. In the lead up to the highly anticipated 2024 election, shocking revelations have emerged of clandestine spying conducted by the Akufo-Addo government on the then leader of the identified as Theophilus Nkansa. This undercover operative continues to hold a position within the personal security detail of the Reverend General Superintendent of Assemblies of God. I think the story is talking about some spy ring around the president, John Dramani Mahama, and all that. But it's a long read. I want to take my time to get into this. But we also know that there have been cameras in the Flagstaff, which makes sense. I mean, I see the wisdom now in the president taking his time to ensure that everything is cleared and checked before he moves into the house. But over to you.
I think, and let's not forget that there's also the issue of the private jet.
Yes.
Where there are claims that apart from the security clearances the military has to give, security people have to sweep it to ensure there are no bugs.
I think it's very basic. It's basic practice that you sweep wherever you go, and I mean, especially at that level, the presidency. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, who would think that you install cameras and there wouldn't be a sweep? I mean, there definitely will be a sweep. So I don't know whether it was intentional or probably because people put hidden cameras there not just to spy on their enemies. Sometimes it is just, for certain things that they want to keep record of. So I'm really wondering why, somebody would think, if it was meant to spy on the new administration, would think that a president will move into an office and not have a security sweep of the place. It's very basic.
I find it interesting that, these accusations, and they've named names, actually. I just don't want to mention them. And I've skimmed through the story, and there are no sources named, You should tell us where you get this information from. If you're naming people, you're saying here that with a complex web of deception, Edu Boahin orchestrated a spy ring under his own direction, strategically placing a mole within this. Where are you getting this information from, the New Republic?
And that is always...
Let us be sure,
That is always problematic. And that is why such stories, while there may be some truth to bugging and all of that, I mean, some ministers in the past have shared with me how when they took, and I'm not mentioning regime, so you wouldn't know, how they took office and later found out that their offices had been bugged by some previous occupant. That's it. If you know anything about security, these are normal. You have to sweep. But some of these stories, it's very difficult to substantiate because there's no evidence. And when names are mentioned, I mean, it becomes a bit problematic. So we're just going to skip this for now.
So we can do our own independent checks and verify what this is about. Mahama's government takes shape with... I wanted to come to Ikea on the president saying that he's done his best for Ghana. That's Thanksgiving.
That's former President Akufo-Addo.
Yes, I have not had a chance to hear you on this.
Yes, I think he's absolutely right to say he's done his best for Ghana. I mean, if you followed the history of politics around the world and even locally, sometimes, especially when a whole country goes through significant economic crisis, it is quite normal for the population to turn on the government at that time. So it usually takes some time for what actually happened to become clear to the people. If we can name names, when Churchill left the UK, it was terrible. Thatcher, even locally, Kwame Nkrumah, people were happy about it. It usually takes time for you to see that, I mean, he wasn't that bad. And for ex-President Nana Addo, there are clear things that we will always remember him for. The free SHS. I mean, it's obvious that he did his best. He tried to do his best. There were problems. He had a government where, for the first time in my lifetime, and I think a lot of people's lifetime, there was a world pandemic, like something on the scale of the yellow virus, things that only happened in the past. So obviously that would have a significant impact on his governance. So I do agree with him perfectly that he's done his bit for the people of Ghana, and we are very grateful. I'm sure with time, the public, things will become clearer, and then I'm definitely sure that his public image will be restored.
Okay.
But just a quick top up, you know, time doesn't heal all wounds.
Oh, definitely.
And it's not every leader. For example, me, and sometimes people feel a bit, because I am your typical Democrat, but I really like what Ignatius Kutu Echampong did in Ghana, in respect of, well, the Yin Chia had its own, you know, dimensions, but Operation Feed Yourself.
Yeah.
If we had continued, the likes of Dr. Eo Abudu and some others who were the real people behind this, if we had continued on that trajectory, I think Ghana would have advanced economically by far.
Yes.
But when you say, you know, time doesn't heal all wounds. Time doesn't always judge you nicely.
Fairly. But I believe
I didn't say fairly, nicely. And as we remember Akufo-Addo, no one can take away free SHS from the former president. And it's good that he started it, though you listen to Haruna Idrissa, he mentions that it's like maybe putting the cart before the horse, because you should have started from a certain level with F-cube. We've gone to free SHS, so it's like top-bottom approach. But whatever the case may be, free SHS is fantastic. And if done well, many more Ghanaians will benefit. However, we'll also remember him for the National Cathedral project.
Well, I mean, it was an ambitious project that saw a lot of problems. And, you know, I was having a discussion on this cathedral issue with a friend, and he was reminding me how almost all cathedral projects around the world have a lot of controversy. So I think let's just leave it at that. I strongly believe, I don't agree with you on that, I strongly believe that with time, it will become clear that ex-President Nana Addo did his best.
All right, thank you. Mr. Griffith, what do you make of that? Those are my only stories, so yeah.
Well, I think, he's giving thanks to God for I think that's okay. But however, you see, the issue, what really happened during his tenure, it would take quite some time for Ghanaians to really, erase from their memory. Especially the fact that the pandemic was blamed for most of the problems that we had.
And the Russian-Ukraine
And the Russian-Ukraine war. And I remember there was an issue recently, the fires that, I saw somebody put on their status that if, like by now we would say because of the fires in the US, the economy is bad in Ghana. Anyway, but Ghana was not the only country that was confronted with these issues. And I think comparatively, what people really, what led to the results that we see is that people saw that comparatively, if you look at Ghana and the countries around us, our indicators and everything were quite bad comparatively. And also, let me also say that people also think of him as didn't listen too much to, because you have a situation where you had a certain number of parliamentarians really rising to say, change the finance minister because things are not going well, from his own political party. And instead, they felt they were being rather targeted. So these are stories that would remain, in our history, political history of this country.
All right.
We'll also remember him briefly for some economic progress before COVID-19. To be fair, before 2021, 2022, there was some stability in there. But someone also sends a message reminding me that we'll remember him for the haircuts, first time.
Yes.
It's
always, it was a difficult time. But, I don't know if you had some time to look at the Afrobarometer report that just came out. They listed about 4 policies that over 70% of Ghanaians wanted continued, regardless of who was in government. And free SHS was one of them. 1D, 1F was one of them. And I think even planting for food and jobs. Yes. Free SHS and 1D, 1F are initiatives personally I know a lot about. I know they were marvelous and they were steps in the right direction. So I think, let's let things settle.
Well, the jury is out.
Yeah.
Let's get into other papers. Mr. Griffith, have you done your papers yet? Or Sweetie, were you going to do a different paper? Right.
Mine doesn't seem to have anything interesting.
I like that we start with the major papers, then we,
The Hawk?
Go down
There's
to
a
ones
story
that are new and not very, you know. So let's do your paper.
We're seeing road tolls to be reintroduced.
That's what the Ghanaian Times newspaper.
Yes, Ghanaian Times, yes. With digitized systems, Abuja. I think his vetting was yesterday, the Honorable Abuja. Donald Trump sworn in as president. that was
a very cute ceremony.
Exciting news. 20th, isn't it? 20th January, finally. I love Melania's outfit. And 5 illegal miners arrested for excavators seized at Wenchi. So I think the whole Galamsey issue is still raging on.
Any major story in there?
I'm going to just the tolls again.
I saw road toll something the page before.
Yeah, so that was the headline initially. So road tolls to be reintroduced with digitized systems. That's the honorable MP who has been appointed as the Minister for Roads. So we are excited to see how that goes with a digitized system. I think we in the MPP have always heralded a digital economy and making things more convenient for the people. So let's see how he does that. CPP supports oral, expects recovery of loot from 1966. I think, yes, if you are going to go on that tangent of recovery.
Is it feasible to say you are recovering from 1966?
So one thing I also noticed about, especially...
And I'm sure they are speaking of after February 24, 1966, when Kwame Nkrumah was
I mean, there's a point
ousted.
there to be made, isn't it? Because, especially oral, now has it become about taking back state lands or financial corruption? And if it's about taking back state lands, I saw recently that I think...
Do we have to differentiate?
No, and I was going to ask you that.
It's easier to have that.
Corruption has many tentacles, different facets.
Let me
state lands, it falls right in
Let me explain why I separate the two. Because currently, it's not absolutely illegal to buy a government land, is it? Yeah. And then financial corruption is illegal. That's why I separate them, so that when you are talking about...
But there are ethical...
Definitely.
And there are people who are getting, I mean, if you're purchasing land in cantonments, I know a few things. I've seen certain, you are looking at millions either in dollars, mostly, which is unfortunate, or CD equivalents, right? I know properties, right? I don't want to mention names. And if those same properties are being sold to certain people with political clout or politically exposed people for a pittance, that doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
If you're buying a certain vehicle of a certain caliber, and I suppose that was why yesterday at the appointments committee, if you remember that question by Afenyo Markin to Harun Idrisi.
Where does he live?
Where he lived, in cantonment somewhere. And do you own the house or are you renting it? And he said, I own the house. And he said, you're a very honest man and all of that. I mean, you can own it, but what is your financial backbone? Haruna, for example, he has a football team. Recently, they sold someone for millions and what? I mean, people do these things. Yeah. If he has a house in cantonments, I'm sure he may have ways of. How about other politicians who do?
So
that's where
I was going with this oral conversation was, I think in President Mohammed's first term in office, Honorable Ablakwa took Jacob Echebi Lamte to court over an issue of state lands. The court threw it out. That's what I'm talking about. And if you're talking about the issue of acquiring state lands, to me personally, ethically, it looks wrong to be able to buy a land in cantonment for 170,000 cedis also. But when you look at it, it's a practice that goes back beyond the Nanado era. Between 2009...
more reason why
we need to stop
so, I mean, let me, sweetie, on this. Yeah. So between 2009 and 20, it was done. During President Kufuor's time, it was done. So I think the conversation should be, should we outlaw it? Or should there be a system where the lands are properly appraised generally, so that if you are going for a land at cantonment, whether you're a state official or not, we know the price you are supposed to pay. That's the right way to go, because now, currently, technically, even though it might not look good, it is not illegal. And so if you are going to go back and see state lands, it should not start from 2016.
Well, I'll tell you something that is definitely illegal. If you are taking parks and gardens land, for example, some of which we've heard, that is definitely a problem.
Yes, and also, you know, the prices at which these lands are going for, you know, like 150,000 when it should be selling for millions. I know that in the past, Okujecho took Jake to court and it didn't go too well.
Yes.
I believe, I'm not a lawyer, But I know there are also laws in this country that allows the state to take any land that they want.
Yes.
And they give you back, they give you compensation. They have to adequately compensate you. In my view, there is no need to take anybody to court to determine whether they acquire these lands legally or not. Just go back by that law and take the lands back and give them back the money they paid as compensation. And that's it.
Yeah, but for me, subsequently, you have to codify it so that it doesn't continue happening.
Another point that I want to make is that
right.
I think that it's important to establish the fact that Oral was not given any particular period, with which they should investigate corruption. So
not investigating corruption.
Not investigation. I mean, take information.
Gathering
very
information.
important. I'm glad you corrected that. Gathering information, and I believe that, if anybody has information at any other time that state land was, acquired in a way that they should still take it to Oral, and they would work on it.
All right. There was a story I think you wanted to do, Mr. Griffith.
Yes. Yeah. The graphic business has a story about the fact that businesses are folding because cost of capital is very high. I think that's a very important story that we need to look at. The CEO of Stanbic has said that policy rate is at 27%. And if you look at policy rate is just the rate after inflation. Risk premium and all those things have not even been built on it. So banks are forced to sell capital as high as 35%. And that's what the going rate is. And I wonder what business that you'll be doing or startups that you would, with all the risks associated with it, that would, you could be paying interest in, excess of 30% and still make it. So I think these are, and if you look at, I looked at the vetting of the ministers yesterday, and most of them, the initiatives that they proposed, they came up with how to make sure there's cheap capital to fund those things. And I think as a nation, we need to really look at that, how to create startups that will not be caught in this web of having to pay interest rates of 35%, because no business will survive at that rate.
Right. Yeah. We have very limited time. Are you done with your paper? Okay. Have you done your paper?
Yeah, actually, I did the graphic.
Okay, all right. Let me quickly do these. The Hawk newspaper, hell, and I mean hell, literally, Gehenna. Hell too good for greedy MPP appointees. And guess who's saying this? Is the person. Nana Obuasi. You know him. He's the one saying this. If I go to page 7. In a scathing tirade, Nana Obuasi, the former Deputy General Secretary of the NPP, has blasted the greed and selfishness of certain appointees within the Akufo-Addo-led government, which he believes led to the party's crushing defeat in the 2024 elections. I'll not go on and on, but this is an interesting one because Nana Obuasi, I've had a few interactions with him, and he can be very blunt with his. But it means also that quite a lot of work has to be done within the MPP to heal certain internal wounds. Mahama delivers on constitutional reform promise with new panel. We've heard of that over the days. And this one got my interest. Prayer warriors or political players? Aglow ladies back with a bang. So here's the story. And after a seemingly quiet hiatus, the women of Aglow Ghana have made a grand return to the national stage, and their timing has raised a few eyebrows. Barely a week into John Dramani Mahama's presidency, the gifty Afenyi Dazi, and by the way, she's a former GJA president, led fellowship dusted off their prayer mats and gathered at the Black Star Square, reigniting their monthly prayer sessions. I didn't see many of those when the MPP was in power, but of course, we all have our own, religious. I'm sure at certain times we are more inclined to pray for the nation, and that is definitely fine. On Economy Times.
And just a second, on that story, it's interesting how social media, people are criticizing the woman because her granddaughter or daughter has lots of bikini shots, on social media. And they're saying, this is a woman who, you're saying, everything has to do with spirituality and God rebukes that, God rebukes this, and your child or your granddaughter is all over the internet with half-naked photos. And the question is, so if the woman is highly spiritual, in jest, must her daughter's lifestyle reflect that? And if it doesn't, does that in any way means that she's failed?
You will always be tagged with, but let's be fair. I think sometimes people go to...
And if you look at it critically, a lot of the men and women of God seem to have problematic
children.
And you are very right there.
Problematic.
We are not mentioning names.
At all. So I don't think they can be blamed. And I don't even think the criticism that Aglo is receiving is absolutely fair. Because for me,
You don't think it's absolutely fair, but it may be fair.
No, so it's not something I've been paying attention to. But I remember because I have a family member. My stepmother is quite involved in that. And they're always doing something.
Do you know why people are raising
Square every year?
Do you know why people are raising it this way? The Aglo I remember, okay, even from the days of, you would say, I think even from Kufo, like back then, before Kufo, and then again, if you watch the trajectory, go and follow it. Kufo comes, when the MPP leaves, Aglo's work, then Mahama.
Is the question that they don't.
Sometimes it's the political sentiment about how active you are about issues on. But I mean, that one, it's for all of us to. People have opinions on them. And
but I don't think that the treatment of her. I don't even know if it's her daughter or grand. I don't think it was absolutely fair.
But that one, I don't.
That cannot be, because this is an adult.
Yeah.
That's the right to.
I mean, it's not the woman dressing like that. How do you judge her by?
Exactly.
Economy Times. Ghana IMF commends renegotiation of ongoing financial program. Ghana's economy to grow further amidst forex stability. That's Fitch and ECG privatization. A tough hurdle ahead for the Bahama government as opposition stiffens. I'll just wrap with this. I felt you might commend it. You see the recent appointees that we just mentioned, the presidential staffers. 5 out of 10 of them are women. I think that's a good thing. And so far, the women's appointments. Does that not make you happy?
Well, I don't see when.
You know, he promised at least, I think it was 30% or so. And
so far, he's doing
women's rights. I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction. But for me, most importantly, it is women that deserve this.
Exactly.
See, it's not like they are appointed. It's not tokenism. They are not just appointed because they are women. They seem to have put in efforts to bring the NDC government into power. As I said before.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have to go. Thank you all so much for joining us. Our guest this morning, Dr. Ikea Mwako, member of the NPP communication team. And we also have Mr. Kwame Ose Griffiths. He's also a member of the NDC communication team. And please stay, because sports comes up next.